Hello, and welcome to Stuart Saturday Live with me, your hostess, Andrea, the 17th century lady. I will not be having a guest with me today and will instead be devoting this episode to all things Christmas and Stuart Christmas. Now, there are many myths associated with Christmas in Stuart Britain, and by the end of the hour, I'd like to have cleared up some of those, combined with some old Christmas carols, poems, Stuart recipes, and more. Many of you have been following my 17th Century Lady Advent Calendar 2024 on my various social media platforms, and I'll continue to post daily until Christmas Day, when I'll share a video of Arcangelo Corelli's Christmas Concerto, which, although published posthumously in 1714, some historians believe to have been first performed in 1690. You'll hear that later on in my show anyway, in the background during a cookery segment. Well, it's been very cold and blustery in recent weeks here in Britain, and my household has been fighting some irritating colds. And there was a particularly bad storm a few weeks ago, and almost all of my medlars that I had a really big bumper crop this year, and about like 99% were destroyed. I can't even find them in the yard. And so I have about a handful of really tiny medlars that survived the bad storms. So we're on the mend, though, and looking forward to the new year. For us, of course, we think of January the 1st as New Year's Day, but back in Stuart Britain, things were rather more complicated. There were two calendars in use at Europe at the time. And we had the Julian calendar, which went back to ancient times, and the newer Gregorian calendar. And we still use this ourselves. But during the 17th century, there was usually a 10-day discrepancy between these two calendars, leading to different dates. Now, for one example, for the execution of Charles I, there are some that reported as being 1648 and others in 1649, because it's just in that period where it was in both years, so to speak. But it's all very interesting anyway. So if you look into that more, I'm sure you'll agree. Well, every nation has its cultural and religious traditions, and Stuart Britain was no exception. Christmas is a Christian festival which celebrates the birth of Jesus. Christmas today is generally more secular and arguably a great deal more commercialized. But in Stuart Britain, people had strongly held Christian beliefs, and we really can't talk about Stuart Britain without covering the more religious aspects of the time and some of the biblical stories they knew and loved. So here we have the Holy Family on the steps, and that would have been a topic which would have been greatly appreciated. Painted in 1648 by Nicolas Poussin, this work is now in the care of the Cleveland Museum of Art. The main figures in this painting are Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus, and they would be the subjects of many artworks throughout the 17th century. Now, many of us know the story of how Mary was visited by an angel who told her she would bear the Son of God. Mary, who then married a carpenter named Joseph, was heavily pregnant when they were told they had to go back to Joseph's birthplace. Upon arriving, they found nowhere to stay, as the town was full of people just like them in a similar situation. There was no room in the inn, but the innkeeper told them that they could stay in his stable. There, Mary gave birth to a son, Jesus. Right here we have a print, Virgin and Child, made by Abraham Bluteling, between 1670 and 1690, after a work by the Italian artist Guido Reni. This is from the Yale Center for British Art. Now, There are so many depictions of the Nativity. It's a great story, after all. Um, and oh, by the way, this painting is the Holy Family with Shepherds from 1616 by Jacob Jordaens, who was a Flemish artist. The shepherds gathered around the Holy Family, and then they were visited by the three wise men bearing gifts. But all was not well. When the three wise men saw the star above Bethlehem, they assumed the birth of the future king would be at the king's palace, and so they made their way there. King Herod, the Roman appointed king of Judea, became rather paranoid about this news that the Magi had brought him, that this king was coming. And so he ordered that all male infants were to be killed. Now, for those unfamiliar with the biblical tale of King Herod, it may seem bizarre that the following could have anything to do with Christmas, but it does. The massacre of the innocents, as abhorrent and distressing a tale as it is, nevertheless inspired a great many artists throughout history, and there are many 17th century depictions of this and other biblical tales. The horrific tale also inspired music. We'll now be listening to Coventry Carol, which was written in the 16th century and which I recorded earlier this week, accompanied by a lute. It's a poignant, melancholic, yet beautiful work, and its continued popularity during Christmas as a carol is testament to its enduring ability to touch our hearts. Well, I hope you like that. It was, I think it's quite a chilling and beautiful song. But next up, we have a poem by the English metaphysical poet John Donne, who lived from 1572 to 1631. But first, I'd like to talk about this rather striking painting I've chosen to accompany it. Here we have the Adoration of the Shepherds by El Greco, and painted circa 1612 to 1614. This work is at the Met Museum. Notice the elongated form, so typical of El Greco's style. This is a similar version of a work El Greco created for a chapel in Spain, which is now in the Prado Museum in Madrid. So here is Nativity by John Donne. Immensity cloistered in thy dear womb now leaves his well-beloved imprisonment. There he hath made himself to his intent weak enough now into the world to come. But oh, for thee, for him, hath the inn no room? Yet lay him in this stall, and from the Orient stars and wise men will travel to prevent the effect of Herod's jealous general doom. Seest thou, my soul, with thy faith's eyes, how he, which fills all place, yet none holds him, doth lie? Was not his pity towards thee wondrous high, that would have need to be pitied by thee? Kiss him, and with him into Egypt go, with his kind mother, who partakes thy woe. As you heard, Donne mentions the effect of Herod's general doom, which is a reference to the massacre of the innocents. The grisly fate that would befall baby Jesus should he and his family remain in Judea was the impetus for their flight into Egypt, which was yet another popular theme in 17th century Europe and had been for hundreds of years by that point. The image here is of the Holy Family, Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus, resting on their journey into the safety of Egypt. This painting, made by Paulus van Vianen II in 1643, and now in the Rijksmuseum, Amsterdam, is a peaceful scene in a pastoral setting. Now, let's go back to Stuart Britain. You've probably heard about the 12 days of Christmas before, and they begin with Christmas Day, December the 25th. Twelfth night is generally the last day of the 12 days of Christmas, when the decorations were taken down and burnt. There was some belief at the time that leaving decorations up past this point would be unlucky. Houses in Britain were decorated, not with Christmas trees as many of us have now, but with greenery, most popularly in the form of ivy and holly, but other greenery was used, such as mistletoe and rosemary. Those who are watching right now will see that I'm wearing a headdress made from ivy and holly that I've been growing in my garden. And it's quite prickly, of course. But I really enjoy making things, and perhaps it's not completely historically accurate, but I wanted to dress up in a festive way for this program. Now, John Evelyn, one of the great Stuart-era diarists, was a keen gardener, among many other things, and he grew holly. Samuel Pepys, another important diarist from the time, visiting him in early October 1665, wrote in his own diary that, "And here he showed me his gardens, which are for variety of evergreens and hedge of holly, the finest things I ever saw in my life." Well, churches would also be decorated during the Christmas season. As Pepys observed on the 23rd of December, he found that the pew that he was going into all covered with rosemary and bays. So quite a festive sort of element there. Stuarts would have Christmas carols, singing, and the playing of musical instruments, and all of this was certainly part of their festivities. It was a time of conviviality, generosity, enjoyment, and prayer. Christmas was a time of gift-giving, particularly in the form of food and drink to family, friends, and neighbors. There was also a Yule log, which sadly now makes people more likely to think of a sugary cake instead of a log of wood, which would be burned for the 12 days of Christmas. Now, some people would keep a bit of that Yule log and use that the next year to light the new Yule log. So what about these royal Stuarts? Well, they do the same, but on a grander and costlier scale, with a variety of entertainments, including feasting and dancing, theatre, hunting, and all manner of games. Queen Anna of Denmark, who was the consort of James VI and First, was keen on masks. She was really great with that. She was quite an amateur dramatic, and she held these very costly theatrical extravaganzas, these Stuart masks. They must have been amazing productions. And Anna's grandson, Charles II, after the Restoration, was given many gifts at Christmas, but as Samuel Pepys reported, they were all taken away by his avaricious mistress, Barbara Villiers. My guest post about that will be out soon on Tony Rich's blog, The Writing Desk, this week. So do check it out if you are so inclined. But Christmas simply isn't the same without some festive foods, and some dishes that are associated with Stuart Britain may surprise you. Turkey, for example, is a popular main feature on most Christmas tables here in the United Kingdom. But what about in the 17th century? You may well wonder, especially as turkeys are native to North America, kind of like me. But they were introduced to England in the 16th century, and by the following century, they were more common. Here we have a 17th century Dutch illustration of a turkey, whose creator is now anonymous, having previously been attributed to Peter Holstein II, who lived circa 1614 to 1673-83. This is also in the collection of the Met Museum in New York. Now, Samuel Pepys, whom I mentioned earlier as being a well-known diarist from the 1660s, really appreciated his food and drink. He mentioned turkeys in his diary on several occasions. For example, in January of 1660, he wrote, "I dined with Mr. Shepley at my lord's lodgings upon his turkey pie." Now, I found this rather remarkable still life. I'm afraid it's low quality, but this was painted in the early 17th century, early to mid, and it's of a still life with a turkey pie. And look how flamboyantly it's been presented here. There are cherries on a plate. There's a silver taza, bread on pewter plates. There's a spoon, a rumour, an earthenware jug, a glass, and cheese, all on a table draped with a red and white cloth. Now, I love still lifes, and frankly, you'll see this sort of thing. Still lifes were very popular in the Stuart period, in the 17th century in general. Um, you can imagine that someone like Pepys would have found this spread most appetizing. A month later, in February, Pepys wrote, "At noon, my father dined with me upon my turkey that was brought from Denmark, and after dinner he and I to the Bullhead Tavern, where we drank half a pint of wine and so parted." So there you have a half a pint of wine. Not something you usually hear nowadays. But if there's no turkey or goose to be had, why then there were other meats available to those who had the means to buy it. Pepys noted that for Christmas, Mr. Godin sent him a great shin of beef and 3 dozen of tongues. Another popular dish was plum porridge, from which our modern plum pudding is descended. Mince pies were popular, but they were different from the sugary baked items we have today, which I have here. I got this a few days ago when I visited Newark, and there was this lovely stall, a local stall, and they did traditional things, and I thought they were so lovely. But these will not contain something that the Stuart mince pies would have had, and that is, what do you think? Minced meat, usually mutton. Some people also enjoyed roasted apples and ale and other holiday drinks and foods. Here we have a modern pork pie that we bought from a local traditional butcher's called Meadowfresh of Chesterfield. This kind of pie is not very different from what you would have found in the Stuart period. In the earthenware bowl on the right-hand side, you'll see a couple of Florentines, which are my personal favorite biscuit or cookie. They are believed to have originated in the 17th century, with the chocolate ganache added in later centuries. So lovely, lovely pie, by the way. And also, there was you might have seen my little pomander. My daughter and I made these, and you just have to get a nice orange and stud them with these cloves. And I remember when I was growing up at school, we had a project with a lot of cloves, and I completely went off cloves. I couldn't stand them for the next, well, 30 years. and so it was, I had to fight against that when I did this. This is the sort of thing that Stuart era folks would have known about. Um, and it's really lovely. It does make a lovely smell. And so I fought against that aversion that I had. I fought against it, and I quite like the smell. The cloves really complement the orange, and vice versa. So it's a lovely Christmassy smell, and it's lasted over 2 weeks now. And so I'm very happy about that. So yeah. Well, next up is something I've never done on this show, a cookery segment. I hope you like it. Hello! Welcome to my kitchen. I live here in northern Derbyshire in England, and I love to cook and I love to try historic cookery recipes. And today, I would like to make a pigeon with you. I've never had pigeon before, but I've read about it so often, and I've wanted to try it for many years. So we're going to have a go with it today. When I had my previous Stuart Saturday live guest, historian Gareth Russell, on the show, he told me that he had eaten one at a pub and enjoyed it. And when he told me that, I became even more determined to try one myself. I happened upon a frozen pigeon, which was stocked in the farm shop at Chatsworth, and I bought it, and I've been looking forward to making it. So, for this recipe, I will be largely following what I found on page 34 of A Book of Cookery, which was published in London in 1650. Now, the recipe couldn't be simpler. It literally says, season them with pepper and salt and butter. So that's pretty straightforward. Now, I have a fan-assisted oven, and I've set that to 170 degrees Celsius. For those who do not have a fan-assisted oven, you could put it to 190 degrees Celsius, or approximately 374 degrees Fahrenheit. Since this is a very small bird, and this is what we have right here, I'm using quite an old Le Creuset dish here. And you can see it's about the size of my hands together. Here we go. Very small bird. It won't take as long to cook, like, for example, a chicken would. So it won't need so long in the oven. I intend to check it in about 25 minutes once we finish the preparations. Let's have a look at the ingredients, shall we? Here I'm using some British butter. Now, there was no amount recommended, so you can use whatever amount you judge best. Now, I've probably used too much here, so I shan't use it all. Next, we have rosemary. Now, this rosemary is something that I've had growing in my garden for a few years. Rosemary is a herb that has been used in England for centuries, and I grow various historic herbs, so these sprigs have been freshly cut from my garden. I read up about which herbs go best with pigeon, and rosemary is recommended as it complements the gamey taste of this meat. It is also a herb that people in Stuart Britain would have known and used. So I also have some of this. This is black peppercorns. These are here. And we also have an English salt. And salt is, of course, one of the oldest flavor-enhancing minerals. I'm now going to use my mortar and pestle to make a finer consistency for the salt and the peppercorns. Time to get grinding. That's looking quite nice now. Now I'm going to take my lovely pigeon here, and I'm going to add the ingredients. All right then, let's put it in the oven. We'll check on it in 25 minutes. Oh, here we are. That looks rather nice. Okay, so I did take it out after about 28 minutes, 25, 28 minutes, and I basted it again, and it looks quite nice. So, let's see if it's tasty. All right, here we are. There we are. Got a little piece here. Let's see. Well, I've had a few moments to consider what that pigeon tasted of, and I initially thought it was more like liver. But after a few moments of just processing the the aftertaste and everything. I think it's more like bone marrow, like the inside of a chicken bone. It's a very distinctive flavor, so perhaps not to everyone's taste, but certainly it was a really interesting project, and I enjoyed it, and I can understand why some folks in the Stuart period would have found this type of meat delicious. So yeah, it's lovely to try things that we normally won't have now. I mean, we generally, if we are meat eaters, those of us who have meat will usually have chicken, beef, that sort of thing, lamb. But yeah, I've rarely had that kind of flavor. And really, I really think it's more like marrow, bone marrow. So very interesting, very distinctive, gamey. The addition of the rosemary, which was not part of the original recipe, I think only enhanced it. So I'm glad I did add the rosemary. Overall, I thought it was a very interesting thing to do, and I enjoyed it. Yeah, it's a sort of metallic taste as well. So perhaps not completely pleasant, but still nice enough to enjoy. So thank you for joining me on this segment. I hope you enjoyed it. Oh, that was fun. I hope you liked that. Well, some people in Stuart Britain didn't think it was right to celebrate the birth of Jesus at all, or the feast of the Nativity of our Savior. So during the chaos and upheaval of the British Civil Wars, which raged on and off again from 1642 to 1651, religious disagreements led to changes in law. By the mid-1640s, there were more Puritans in the government and Parliament, and they were largely against Christmas. This wasn't something that just came out of thin air, though. On the contrary, this sort of belief had been growing since about the late 16th and early 17th centuries. Some people were very, very serious about the Bible, and so that was part of it, and so they just didn't believe it should be celebrated, and they thought that people should go to work as usual. One prominent Puritan called William Prynne was against the idea of Christmas, referring to it as a disorderly bacchanalian grand Christmas, and that it was more fit for pagans than Christians. This he wrote in his book Histriomastix, which I usually refer to that book when I talk about views on theatre in the Stuart period. And no, he wasn't a fan of theatre either. He was, however, considered something of a Puritan martyr, for he was rather severely punished for the views he expressed in that work. And I won't go into detail, but you can look it up. It's rather ghastly. And there's this idea that Oliver Cromwell personally banned Christmas and mince pies and all that. But I think we should look into that a little bit, shall we? In December 1644, Parliament, not Cromwell, issued a public notice that everyone was to fast, not feast, especially on Christmas Day. And let's read it together, shall we? It states, "Whereas some doubts have been raised whether the next fast shall be celebrated, because it falleth on the day which heretofore was usually called the Feast of the Nativity of our Saviour, the Lords and Commons and Parliament, assembled so order and ordain that public notice be given that the fast appointed to be kept on the last Wednesday in every month ought to be observed until it be otherwise ordered by both Houses of Parliament, and that this day in particular is to be kept with the more solemn humiliation, because it may call to remembrance our sins and the sins of our forefathers, who have turned this feast, pretending the memory of Christ, into an extreme forgetfulness of him, by giving liberty to carnal and sensual delights, being contrary to the life which Christ himself led here upon earth, and to the spiritual life of Christ in our souls, for the sanctifying and saving whereof Christ was pleased both to take a humane life and to lay it down again. Well, in other words, it was outrageous to give in to feasting and merriment. But if you thought that was pretty harsh, it became worse 3 years later in 1647 with an ordinance for abolishing festivals. And that read that the said feast of the Nativity of Christ, Easter and Whitsuntide, and all other festival days, commonly called holy days, be no longer observed as festivals or holy days within this kingdom of England and Dominion of Wales. As you can see, this ban was not just for Christmas, but other important Christian holidays too, such as Easter. As one of our previous guests, Stuart Orme of the Cromwell Museum, told us, such bans were unpopular and difficult to uphold. Christmas lovers rebelliously put up greenery for decorations in some towns, only for these to be ripped off by the more Puritan-minded. Some people rioted, sometimes violently, in towns such as Ipswich, Bury St Edmunds, Bristol, Canterbury. These people weren't going to give up Christmas without a fight. And some historians reckon that the anger against such heavy-handed decrees may have stoked the resentment that led to the Second Civil War. And here we have the frontispiece for A Vindication of Christmas from 1652. Here we can see three men from the left to the right. We have a wealthy, fashionable city dweller, Father Christmas in the middle, and a country dweller. The fashionable man says to Father Christmas, "Keep out, you come not here." To which Father Christmas replies, "Oh, sir, I bring good cheer." He's backed up by the country lad who says, "Old Christmas welcome, do not fear." So we see the fight back against this Christmas ban. And with the restoration of the monarchy in 1660, Christmas was once again allowed to be celebrated. No one needed to be in fear of being punished by soldiers if they were caught cooking their Christmas goose or going to church or putting up decorations. John Evelyn, a diarist and courtier, whom I mentioned earlier, in the Stuart period, was arrested during the interregnum for attending a church service. But he didn't have a penalty for that, so it was okay. But it just goes to show that there was this possibility of being arrested by soldiers for doing anything that was like celebrating Christmas. So it's all very much. I think for those who are not acquainted with this part of history, there are loads of books and websites now with more information. So feel free to read as much as you can, because it's a very interesting part of the British Civil Wars and that period. Our next Christmas carol is While Shepherds Watched Their Flocks by Night. And that is attributed to the Stuart era poet laureate Nahum Tate, who lived from 1652 to 1715. This lovely painting is the Adoration of the Shepherds by Gaspard de Creye, made circa 1640 to circa 1650, and it is in the collection of the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. It shows the Holy Family surrounded by the shepherds, animals, and with angels above. While Shepherds Watched Their Flocks by Night first appeared in print in 1702 and was arranged to Winchester Old, an anonymous 16th century tune. The carol is based on Luke 2, 8 to 14, in the King James Version, which of the Bible, which is very much a Stuart era publication. Now this reads, "Now there were in the same country shepherds living out in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were greatly afraid. Then the angel said to them, 'Do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which will be to all people. For there is born to you this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And this will be the sign to you. You will find a babe wrapped in swaddling cloths, lying in a manger.' And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, 'Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men.'" Until 1782, it was the only Christmas carol officially sanctioned by the Church of England. The image I've selected for this next song is Adoración de los Pastores by Bartolomé Esteban Murillo, now in the Museo del Prado, Madrid.
While shepherds watch their flocks by night, or seated on the ground, the angel of the Lord came down, and glory shone around. "Fear not," said he, "for mighty dread had seized their troubled mind. Glad tidings of great joy I bring to you and all mankind. To you in David's town this day is born of David's line a Savior, who is Christ the Lord, and this shall be the sign. The heavenly babe you there shall find, to human view displayed, all meanly wrapped in swaddling bands, and in a manger laid. Thus spake the seraph, and forthwith appeared a shining throng of angels praising God, who thus addressed their joyful song. All glory be to God on high, and to the earth be peace. Goodwill henceforth from heaven to men begin and never cease."
That song was understandably much more upbeat than the Coventry Carol, and is both positive and joyous. I think a great deal of what the cultural zeitgeist was like can be gleaned from the poetry and literature of the period. And with that, finally, this is From Christ's Nativity by Henry Vaughan, who lived from 1621 to 1695. Awake, glad heart, get up and sing. It is the birthday of thy King. Awake, awake, the sun doth shake light from his locks, and all the way breathing perfumes doth spice the day. I would I had in my best part fit rooms for thee, or that my heart were so clean as thy manger was. But I am all filth and obscene, yet if thou wilt, thou canst make clean. Sweet Jesu will then let no more this leper haunt and soil thy door. Cure him, ease him, or release him, and let once more by mystic birth the Lord of life be born in earth. People of all ages have been in touch saying they've enjoyed the show this year, and its success certainly would not have been possible without the contributions made by our many wonderful guests since December 2023. Season 1 of Stuart Saturday Live was both, I hope, informative and educational. I'm very pleased to announce that Season 2 of Stuart Saturday Live is now fully scheduled, and I'm so excited. I would like to end this season by looking back at our 12 remarkable guests. Our first episode was a year ago and proved to be the shortest because I was so nervous. I remember my palms were sweating and my heart was pounding because, honestly, I'm a very shy person. I've been all my life, but I've loved to act and I've loved theater. So I was trying to get into that again, and it's hard. But my first guest was my friend, historian Liam Maloney, who joined us from the Republic of Ireland. He's the person who created the Keep It Stuart hashtag. But sadly, he's moving away from the early modern period and is increasingly becoming well known for his polar history work, particularly about Shackleton. And I wish him all the best in his future endeavors. Our second guest was Mark Turnbull, who has contributed so much to Stuart history with his podcast, Cavalier Cast. Joining us back in January, Mark spoke with me about Charles I and his book, Charles I's Private Life. And I'm happy to say that he will be back in Season 2 of Stuart Saturday Live in 2025, when his next book, which is on Prince Rupert of the Rhine, will be out. Our third guest was Elizabeth St. John, who joined me to chat about her novel set in the Stuart period and her family connection to Lydiard House. As she's based in California, she woke up really, really early to join us, and she's always been such a pleasure to chat to and so supportive. So, a really lovely lady. In March, I was joined by history writer Joshua Proven, who took us on an information-packed look at Edo, Japan. He had so much to contribute. It was wonderful. And he has this fantastic energy. We had wonderful feedback on this episode, especially from the younger members of our audience. Our fifth guest was historian Leander Delisle, who chatted with me about Henrietta Maria, who is probably best known as Charles I's wife and queen. Leander was a great sport, having filled in at very short notice for a guest who had had to cancel. She's also been so supportive and kind to me, and that's been much appreciated. Our sixth guest was historian Gareth Russell, who spoke with me about his book, The Palace. And we chatted about Hampton Court Palace during the time of the Stuarts and more. I'm pleased to announce that he will return in February to chat with me about his forthcoming release, Queen James, and James's oft-overlooked wife, Anna of Denmark. In June, our seventh guest, historian and novelist Nicola Cornick, delighted us with her knowledge of Ashdown House, Lord Craven, and the characters of her most recent novel set in the Stuart period, The Other Gwyn Girl. The characters being Rose Gwyn and her more famous sister, Nell Gwyn. In August, we had our next guest, art historian and novelist Christine de Mello, who joined us from Brazil. We listened to a sample of the audiobook I narrated of her novel, The Apprentice, Love and Scandal in the Kingdom of Naples, which is set in the early 17th century. We spoke about 17th century Italian art and much more. It was really great. I enjoyed that chat. Next up, we had naval historian and historical novelist J.D. Davies, who spoke with me about the Anglo-Dutch Wars, Samuel Pepys, the Royal Navy, and more. I've known David for many years now, so it was lovely to have him on the show. Then in September, I was joined by historian and professor Adrian Tinniswood for a special Great Fire of London episode. He's written some of the best books on the fire of 1666 and on Stuart Britain in general, so it was a huge honor to have him as a guest. In October, we welcomed historical novelist Margaret Porter, who spoke with me from New England about 17th century ballet and her books set in the 17th century, including A Pledge of Better Times and The Myrtle Wand. In November, we welcomed Stuart Orme, the curator at the Cromwell Museum, and we chatted all about Oliver Cromwell and the myths associated with him and more. I want to thank all of my wonderful guests who shared some of their great knowledge with us. They were all lovely, courteous, and very generous with their time. If you've missed out on any of these episodes, don't worry, they are all available on my YouTube channel, The 17th Century Lady. The audio tracks, if you prefer not to watch the videos, are available on my podcast, which is also called The 17th Century Lady. I hope you enjoyed spending some time with me today, and I look forward to having the pleasure of your company again in late January when Season 2 of Stuart Saturday Live starts. We have a whole new lineup of guests scheduled, as I said. And as always, this is a family-run show. So many, many thanks to my really great husband and producer, Gavin Orland of Orland Media Limited, and to our daughter, Juliet, who has been a great assistant for this whole year. I couldn't do it without these two, so thank you. Well then, from the 17th century lady and family, we wish you a very Merry Christmas and a happy, productive, and healthy New Year. Until next time, don't forget to keep it Stuart. Bye.